did in this room. It took a lot of people from different walks of life, from different places in the country, and for a little while, it connected. It brought us all into relationship with one another around a common nucleus of narrative. Think about how strange that is. That for one 300-second period, we were able to do that. Just as it reorganizes a room full of different people, it also reorganizes information. It takes fragments of ideas, bits and pieces of meaning, and it places them in relationship to one another so that the sum is greater than the parts. And because it reorganizes a room, and because it reorganizes information, it has the potential to reorganize the world. Because a powerful story, well told, that intersects you in your life at the right time should send you back out into the world a little bit differently than when you came in. That's our native language. That's what we're born to do. And what we're going to do together over the next 37 minutes is figure out how we can take control of the power that lives within us to create powerful narratives, to marshal them, to deploy them, to use them effectively, to get done whatever it is you want to get done in the world. And to make your teams and your organizations capable of doing that too. Does that sound like a worthwhile endeavor for the next 34 minutes? Okay, great, let's do it. So let's begin with the big idea. That if we understand that stories have power, innate power, we get that, we're sort of all on the same page, that's de facto, okay? We get it, stories are powerful. But how do they work? If they're so powerful, aren't they worth dissecting and analyzing to figure out what their inner workings are like? And if we can analyze them and dissect them, could we then figure out how we could use them more effectively? The answer is yes. So here's your first big idea. Every great story has a similar shape. Say that with me. Every great story has a similar shape. Now, it might sound a little strange to you because we don't really think of stories as having shapes. They're immersive. They're experiential. They wash over us. They carry us along. But if you look at them mathematically, with a very light degree of mathematics, you can see that they actually travel similar vectors. So let's analyze this. Every great story has a similar shape. Let's look at it on two axes. The first axis is GI. GI. G stands for good fortune, wealth, prosperity, happiness, accomplishment, joy, family, connection, love, all of the wonderful things that you want to have happen in your life. I stands for ill fortune, loss, and disappointment, and struggle, and frustration, and anxiety, and despair, and loneliness, and all of the things you don't want to have happen in your life. The second axis is BE. B stands for beginning, and E stands for electricity. Good. I'm kidding, it was in. You're right. Don't get weird. Okay, GI, BE. Here we go. Every great story has a similar shape. Let's begin. Once upon a time, there is a man. Putting slightly towards good fortune, slightly above average, because that's how all men like to imagine ourselves. Moving on through life with dreams and goals and aspirations and things he wants to accomplish. And as he's traveling life's journey, things are going so well, and then, damn it, he falls into a hole. And he's down in the hole, and he's looking back up at the journey he was supposed to have, and he's shaking his fist at this guy, and he's cursing the world because this wasn't supposed to happen to him. He had a perfect plan. He had it laid out. He mapped it to the grid. He had a PowerPoint to tell everybody else about it. But something happened along the way to disrupt what he thought was his journey's goal, and now he's at the bottom of the pit. But something happens when he's down there in that hole. See, you know this story. Something happens. He finds a hidden staircase. He discovers a secret tunnel. He's a friend up top he can yell at to throw a rope down to. It's going to rain and the water's going to lift you to the top of the pit. It doesn't matter what fairy tale or legend or myth or life experience you're in. Something happens at the bottom of the valley when things seem to be at their worst to turn the game around. Of course, the man climbs up out of the hole and reaches heights above which he never thought possible. We love that story. We love that story. We tell ourselves that story again and again and again, anytime we need a second act, anytime we need a comeback, anytime we need a recovery, anytime last quarter didn't look the way we want this quarter to look, anytime last fiscal year didn't close very well, anytime the executive left and it was weird, anytime we had a merger or acquisition that nobody wanted. This is the story we tell ourselves. It can all turn around if the right thing happens at the bottom of the valley. If every great story has a similar shape, let's look at another. Once upon a time, there is a man. Slightly below average, because that's how all women like to imagine all men. Moving through life, also with dreams and goals and aspirations, sort of middling. Things are going fine until one day the marvelous thing happens. He meets a girl. And suddenly everything is possible, and it's light and love and bad poetry and chocolates, until of course you know what happens. Damn it, he's a moron, and he loses it. Which inevitably happens. All the men in this room know this story very well too. All the women have been observers from the outside, right? This is the path all men travel. Eventually, of course, down here at the bottom of it, as he's looking back at the perfect life he could have had if he hadn't been such an idiot, something happens. He gets a better job. He has friends tell him to stop being an idiot. He goes to therapy. I don't know what happens. Something happens at the bottom of the valley to turn the game around. You know how it is. The last 10 minutes of the romantic comedy, he chases the girl, catches her before she gets on the plane. They all live happily ever after, right? We love this story. We love this shape. We tell it to ourselves again and again. And in fact, right now, if you were to reflect on your own life, if you were to think about your own romantic adventures and misadventures, it would have this shape. Over the course of an entire relationship, or over the course of today, when you left home to come here, one of you might be in a different place on this trajectory than the other, right? But this is the journey that we travel every day, every week, every season, every lifetime. Let's do one more. This one's special because it's held in common across cultures east and west, which is very strange. Usually there's a sort of a grand divide from a narrative perspective between Eastern and Western cultures. But this one begins with a common character that is the weakest in all of literature. A young, helpless girl. A young, helpless girl who has lost her mother and whose father has remarried, and now she lives with her two terrible stepsisters. Oh, you know this story. That's good. All right, they don't know how she does it. It's a terrible life. She has no friends. She talks to animals. It's weird. She dresses in rags all day. She cleans. And one day she meets somebody who gives her a new dress and a makeover and a means of transportation. And then one day she finds herself dancing with Prince Charming at the ball. An experience that never would have been possible, she imagined, from where she began. But now she is at the height of happiness, delirious with what life has brought her, but you know what happens. Bong, 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 clock strikes midnight. Carriage is just a pumpkin, the horse are just mice. She's back in her rags talking to her animal friends until the game is changed. What happens? She was found. Shoe fits, Disney magic, pixie dust. They all live happily ever after. Right? Every great story has a similar shape. Now there are endless variations of this. There are endless adjustments you can make to this flow. But what I want you to walk away with at this moment is the simple idea that the ebb and flow of great stories is the same. The establishment of a status quo, the disruption of a status quo, and then the eventual turnaround that leads us to a sense of satisfactory conclusion. If you think of it in terms of how we experience it emotionally, it feels a little bit like this. We begin all stories with a sense of what might be possible in the world that we live in. We very quickly realize that not all of those possibilities will happen, that they will not all be made into reality. And so we stumble into a sense of loss and disappointment until we decide, or not, to struggle our way back to the goal we had set in mind originally. If we look at it in terms of emotions, it looks like this. But if you look at it in terms of pivot points, it looks a little bit different. So instead of looking at it as what you feel, look at it as how it's structured. I know the audience that's in this room. Let's turn stories into logic and math, shall we? Not artistry, forget the artistry. If we look at the shape of all great stories, we really highlight the fact that they're driven by energy transition moments. Moments where the vector shifts because of something that happens in the story. There are 4 great pivots that drive all of the stories you and I know, and here they are. The first pivot is once. Initiation, kickoff, a beginning, setting the context and letting us know where we are. How many of you have read Gulliver's Travels? All right, if you didn't read the 1741 novel from Jonathan Swift, then you probably saw the movie with Jack Black, right? Classic film. And you know how it begins. It begins with this chubby little man tethered to the seashore with ropes and tiny little people around him, right? That context determines the rest of the narrative, right? It kicks you off and gets you off and running. You begin with once, but then very quickly, if your narrative is created precisely, you hit the second pivot, but. Once upon a time, there was a man who had hopes, but he tripped and fell into a hole. Once upon a time, there was a man who fell in love, but he was an idiot and he lost her. There's the challenge moment, the conflict moment. I call this second pivot the roller coaster pivot, because it really gets the story going. It's at this moment when you realize you're along for the ride. Netflix recently released its data, maybe just a year ago. around what episode of popular television series you decided on a Friday night to cancel your weekend plans, to stay in your pajamas, to order food in, and to sit and watch 18 hours straight of House of Cards. They know exactly what episode it was that hooked you. For House of Cards, if you're a fan, it was episode 3. You may or may not remember what happened to that episode, that's good. Breaking Bad fans in the room, it was episode 2. That's the episode with the bathtub through the ceiling. I'm not going to ruin it for those of you who haven't seen it. Pretty bad, right? You're in it. You're in it by that point. How I Met Your Mother, if you're a fan of the show, which everybody was until the last episode, How I Met Your Mother actually was episode 8, which is serious danger zone for television, right? You get canceled by that time. But by episode 8, now what did all these episodes have in common? Why were these the moments when all of you collectively said, to hell with the weekend plans, I'm not even going into work on Monday, I gotta see how this story is. What they all have in common is it was the episode in which you realized what the true conflict narrative was going to be. What was the challenge that our hero or heroine was going to confront? You can watch episode 1 of Breaking Bad, you can watch episode 1.5 of Breaking Bad and think, oh, this might end up well. By the end of episode 2, it's not ending up well, right? You know where this is going, but now you're enthralled. You have to see how will this conflict, this moral conflict be overcome. That is what a good story does. It introduces to you a very swift but moment. However, if you have a friend who's a very bad storyteller, and I know that you know who these people are, you're sitting next to them at a bar, and they're 3 or 4 or 5 minutes into the story, and you're like, good God, man, get on with it. You know these people? Right? Don't look at them now, they'll know that you're thinking about them. If you know these people, it's because they're not very good at this, right? If you don't finish a book, if you stop 10 pages in, you're like, forget it. Or if you walk out of a movie, forget it. It's because this didn't happen soon enough. We did not identify the challenge that all of us together, as readers, as heroes, were going to fight against. The third pivot is my favorite. The third pivot suggests that everything that comes after will be different than everything that came before. Once, but until. It's a really powerful English word, 2 silly syllables, until. But it messages this, that up until this point in the story, stuff has happened to our hero. But at this point in the story, our hero starts making shit happen. This is the moment of turnaround. This is the moment when resources are grasped. This is the moment when friends are called in. This is the moment when you realize you can use the force, right? This is the moment when you hurl yourself into your destiny. It's a moment in every Harry Potter book when the courage is mustered, right? When the hero determines that he or she, at this moment, will be what they were meant to be. And if they do this right, if the until moment is powerful enough, you will fight with them every step of that rugged journey up the side of the mountain to get to the mountaintop, to get to the successful conclusion, to get to the at last moment. These are the 4 pivots of every great story. Once, but, until, at last, from initiation to successful denouement. This is the journey that we travel. Let's say them together, cheap mnemonic device. What are the 4 pivots of every great story? Once, but, until, at last. Quick pause for a takeaway. The next time you build a PowerPoint deck, the next time you write an executive summary, you ask yourself if you have used this tool. Have we appropriately established context? Have we appropriately named the challenge and conflict we're facing? Have I given my team and my organization, have I named the resources that we are going to cull together? And have I even established what the mountaintop vision is? If you use these 4 right, it's something as mundane as an email thread to somebody that you need to accomplish a certain set of tasks towards an end goal. I promise you, clarity will increase, connection with your message will increase, and actions, behavior change coming out of it will increase. Okay, all this is well and good if you think of it from religious history, which is where I come from, right? I did a graduate work in American literature and religious history. Religious history, by the way, is just the story of all the stories that refuse to die, no matter how many times people try to kill them. That's what religious history is, right? Human beings are never more creative than they are when they're trying to do something bad to somebody who believes something differently than they do. American literature is just a collection of all the stories that refuse to die, just got lodged in our cultural consciousness and we couldn't get it out. Obviously, when you look at mythology and archetype, this applies. But it also applies to things that you might think are a bit less timeless. You don't think this is going to work, but it's going to work, I swear. All right, we have 2 axes, GI, right? BE. Here we go. Once upon a time there was a man, his name is Will Smith. We're going to put him slightly above average, slightly towards good fortune, because you know it's like 40 years ago, he looks exactly the same. So he's doing fine. Here we go. Do it with me. In West Philadelphia, born and raised. On a playground is where I spent most of my days. Yeah, what? Chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool. Yeah, playing some b-ball outside of the school, right? We got it. Okay. So here is our initiation. We know where we are. We know when we are. We know who we're with, and we know what we're doing. It's all going pretty well. But a couple of guys, they were up to no good. They making trouble in the neighborhood. I got in one little fight. My mom got scared. She said, "You're moving with your auntie and your uncle in Bel Air, right?" Which is hell for a boy from West Philadelphia. So he's got his status quo. It's been upended. Disorientation has arrived, but you know how the rap is. Pulled up to the, yeah, about 7 or 8. Yelled to the cabbie, "Yo home, smell you later." I looked at my, here we go, I looked at my what? Kingdom. I was finally there to sit on my throne as the Prince of Bel Air. Kingdom, throne, prince. 3 words like that within the series. It does not get more archetypal than this, right? Will Smith is our archetype for this, and this is a sitcom of questionable quality in the mid-1990s. And it's following the exact same archetypal movement, right, as any of the other great stories. Let's do another one, because, you know, I'm generationally sensitive. Here we go. It's the story of a lovely lady who was bringing up 3 very lovely girls, all of them hair of gold, like their mother, the youngest one in curls. Perfect, a lovely little Aryan family in 1973. It's also the story of a man named Brady, who was bringing up 3 boys of his own. They were 4 men living all together. What? But they were all alone. What's the next word of the song? Until the one day when this lady met this fellow and they knew that it was much more than a hunch and the screw of a big family, and that's the way we all became. Everybody, the Brady Bunch. The Brady. That's all right, fine. Every great story has a similar shape. Guys, we can keep doing this, right? Sit right back and we'll hear a tale of a fateful trip. If it weren't for the courage of the fearless crew, the middle would have been lost. What I love about this example is that basically the entire 7.5-year run of Gilligan's Island happens right here. We wanted to go on a 3-hour tour. We got left on an island, and every single episode is we get off the island, no we won't, we get off the island, no we won't, we get off the island, no we won't. And if you watched it to the conclusion of the season, you realize they do get off the island, and then they go back. They go back to the island, which is, for me, this is basically like Lost before it became a drama on ABC, right? This is the prototype for Lost. It doesn't matter what narrative we pick. All of our favorite movies, all of our favorite books, all of our favorite characters, all those we follow year after year, season after season, episode after episode, book after book, follows the same arc. It's not just true of fiction, it's also true in songs. This is John Bon Jovi. Johnny used to work at the docks, but the union went on strike. He's down on his luck. Is tough. So tough, right? What I like about this is that it too is a ballad sung from the valley. And it tells you it's sung from the valley. It tells you, hey, we're halfway there, right? This story isn't over yet. We've got a mountaintop to climb, but I'm singing this to you to remind you that stories have different endings than the one that we're in right now. It doesn't just apply to works of art, it also is used by all of us when we try to map our experience. Do you recognize this picture? Of course. President Reagan is standing in front of the River Gates, West Germany. Why does this stick in our heads? You can hate Reagan, doesn't matter. You can think trickle-down economics is crap, doesn't matter. When you remember this story, you remember it for a reason. And it's because the structure of our political mythology follows the same pattern. We are a great nation emerging out of World War II as an international superpower, unquestionably the leader of the free world, but we get mired into 2 wars that we don't fully understand, while meanwhile an international superpower rises up against us until we have an iconic, courageous leader who stands in front of the world, points his finger at the enemy and says, tear down. You don't even have to think that's true. That's the mythology. And that's the power of good stories when you shape them appropriately, when you marshal their movements, and when you use the 4 pivot points. Okay, That's how stories are structured. But why do they work? Let's take a little hiatus here for a second, away from the mathematics here, and think about what it is that's happening inside of our brains when we confront a good story. The last 10 years have been really powerful for those of us who study narratives, because now we have the science to back up what our instincts tell us is true. Significant advances in fMRI technology now allow us to watch our brains at work. So research laboratories and hospitals all over the planet are sticking people into cages, and they're watching their brains while they read a book, or while they watch a scary movie, or while they laugh with a friend, to see what happens in our brains when we are confronted with different stimuli. So we use the same approach when we ask what's happening when we're confronted with a powerful narrative. Well, what we learn is that your brain is a remarkable, your brain is a liar. Your brain lies to you at all times, and one of the most powerful ways it lies to you is when narrative hits you effectively. It triggers what we call mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are nerve cells that light up in parts of the brain connected to the parts of the brain that are lit up when someone else is experiencing something. Let me put this another way. You cry at a sad movie because your body actually thinks it's happening to you. Your blood pressure goes up when you're reading a thriller late at night or watching a frightening movie because your body thinks it's happening to you. You're queasy and nervous when you watch somebody, like Jason Bourne, straddling the side of a building, right? Will he fall off? It's not happening to you. Matt Damon's fine. He's handsome, he's wealthy, he's famous, he is literally in no danger, and yet your body is pretending that he is and that you are too, right? This is the power of narrative. It tricks your body into having a physiological response that is connected to the feelings and the experience of the person whose book you're reading, whose story you're encountering, whose movie you're watching. What this ends up doing is triggering what we call the architecture of empathy. Meaning it opens up in your brain the capacity to understand another person's experience in a way that you are not capable of doing under any other circumstances. There is no other tool that we have that enables us to, on an individual and collective basis, look at someone who is not us, who is different than us in many, many ways, and still truly imagine what they are feeling and experiencing. And because that's true, story has the capability of opening up conversation and dialogue more than any other tool we have for information transmission or communication. This is particularly proving true when we look at advances in virtual reality. Anybody put on an Oculus device? Anybody sat down with a cardboard reader and thrown your phone into it? I love being around for people's first experience of virtual reality. First of all, because they look like an idiot, right? They're like dancing around looking at the ceiling. But also because no one walks away from that unchanged. They have truly been transported someplace else. So we work with the UN with their digital lab for connection across the globe. They have if you're in New York, let me know, you should go to the UN and go to this digital exhibit. You put on these goggles and you enter a refugee camp halfway around the world. And you spend 3 minutes there looking around and walking around. You're not there, of course, but you're there. And you see where they live, and you see what they eat and not eat, and you see where they have to go to the bathroom, and you see how they have to spend their days. And you don't walk away from those 3 to 5 minutes with the capability of not thinking differently about the conflicts and the drama around the world. And it's not because some master movie producer gave you a film that made you feel deeply. It's because all you did was watch a young girl as she went about her day, the story of her day. It transports you. The architecture of empathy is opened up in moments like this, and it makes us far more capable as leaders if we turn it on. Do you have a team that you wonder why they don't respond to you the way that you want them to? Do you have a group of stakeholders in your organization, from your executive board on down, that you wonder why they don't understand your vision? I would ask you, have you opened up vulnerable stories about yourself? Have you opened up a compelling story about your team and your past and your organization to enable them to connect with you? It's not their fault if they don't connect with you, it's yours. Because the tools for connection are now within your grasp. It is narrative logic. It is narrative tool sets that enable us to do this. A gentleman named Dan McAdams, who has for the past 30 years done research out of Northwestern University, has studied this idea of narrative identity. The best way to put it is that we form our sense of self and our sense of collective based on the stories we have to tell about ourselves. So another thought experiment. Remember when you were 15 years old. Get yourself back there. 15 or 16. For some of you, it's far back enough that it's not memory, it's more imagination, but you can go ahead and use that skill set. Go back there, right? You're 15 or 16 years old. Put yourself in a place, in a car, in a gymnasium, in your house, in your room, at school, wherever you were. Got it? Good. When you were that age, what you were doing was frantically collecting as many stories as possible that were proof that you were a person in the world. That you were funny, that you were athletic, that you were charming, that you were interesting, that you were worthwhile. And you spent all of your high school years collecting all of these stories, and then you go to college, and nobody cares about your stupid stories, right? You collected all these stories about you were a star athlete, you were in the paper every weekend for touchdowns that you scored and hoops that you made or whatever, and then you go to college, and at some point someone said, if you tell us one more story about you being a heroic high school athlete, we're never going to talk to you again. Your stories ran out of currency, and so you had to very quickly compile new ones. And until you did, until you compiled new stories, you actually were less productive as a citizen. You were less engaged intellectually. You were less connected emotionally because you had those stories as evidence of who you were. So now ask yourself, the last time you had hired a new person, or the last time you changed jobs, or the last time there was a reorg, or the last time you had people moving roles, this is what happens. All of the old stories they spent all the time collecting, all the stories you spent collecting about your team are now void. And we have to find new stories. The best thing we can do for new hires, the best thing we can do after team reorgs or when we're facing some challenge that requires us to switch roles, is help each other find stories fast. Because even one or two or three pieces of story evidence give us this sense of self and purpose and drive to keep getting better. Okay, now you know how stories are structured, you know how they work behind the scenes. I want to leave you with 5 prefabricated stories. Literary theorists call them archetypes, but that's just a fancy word for basically pretend that story is an operating system. And what these are your 5 basic programs. And you pull them out for what you need, right? You pull out Excel, you pull out Word, you pull out your web design thing. You pull them out and you put them to use for a specific tool a specific goal you need to accomplish at some time. Here they are, the 5 stories that we live by. The first one is a man or a woman sets off on a quest. A man or a woman sets off on a quest. Anybody own Best Buy stock? No? A few people are admitting it? All right. Depends on for how long you've owned it, whether or not you like me asking that question or not, right? There was a point about 6 years ago when we thought Best Buy would be Circuit City, that it would be Linens and Things, that it would be the Virgin Megastore, that it would be Tower Records, right? We're watching the collapse of all of these big box stores. How is it that they survived? And not only survived, but their stock price now hovering between $38 and $40, up from 11. Up from the bottom of 11 no more than 5 years ago. How is that? If you get on a call with Hubert Joly, their CEO, and you listen to him talk about the work they're doing in the company, what he tells you every single time is the story of a man on a quest. A program he created called Renew Blue has 16 steps, and it's meant to recuperate Best Buy. It's meant to replace them in a marketplace, seen in a different light, performing a different function. And every step of the way, that mountaintop where we're headed is in sight, and these 16 stairs are what's going to get us there. You know a couple of them. Here's one. What burdens Best Buy? We have way too much physical footprint, right? We have big box stores. It's really, really, really expensive. So what do? We actually lease part of our store to one of our vendor partners. So we give it to Microsoft, or we give it to Apple, or we give it to Samsung, or we give it to Nintendo. What does this do? It decreases our overhead on our physical footprint, and it makes us closer with our vendor partners, right? Brilliant strategy. You know this one. You've been in the airport lately and watched by a Best Buy kiosk. Why is this cool? Because if you've already mastered the supply chain and you know how to get product efficiently from place to place, why not shrink that massive box store into one tiny little vending machine and then put it in the one place in all the world where an Amazon drone will never visit? An airport concourse, right? Hubert Joly has 16 of these, and every one of them is a stair step up the mountain, and he makes it very, very clear. I would ask you, where are you right now? Do you have a gutsy, ambitious vision that needs to be accomplished? And make sure everybody knows that every single move you make is a stair step up that ladder. None of this is done in a void. None of this is done ad hoc. None of this is done one at a time. It is each one a rung in the ladder up. Second story. Stranger arrives in a strange land. Stranger arrives in a strange land. I was 13 years old the first time I visited Japan. I had studied Japanese all summer. I had learned their customs. I flew in a plane alone for the first time in my young life, and I arrived in Japan late in the evening, tired, jet lagged. My family picks me up. That's going to host me for the month that I'm there. We are escorted off into this little bungalow in the